The air inside the orbital command station Vigilant Dawn hummed with the low thrum of life support and the distant chatter of a dozen species coordinating the fragile peace between humanity and the Varelian Concord. At the heart of this controlled chaos stood Corporal Finn O'Connell, a man whose charm was as reliable as his aim with a pulse rifle, usually. His current mission, however, required neither charm nor marksmanship. It demanded mischief. Across the polished obsidian floor of the observation deck, bathed in the soft violet glow of the gas giant Zyra looming through the viewport, stood his partner, Commander Lyra Valen. She was a vision of alien elegance and lethal grace. Her skin, pale as moonstone, contrasted sharply with the cascade of snow-white hair that fell past her shoulders, unbound save for a single silver circlet at her temple. Her armor sleek, articulated plates of polished silver etched with faintly glowing Varelian glyphs, hugged her humanoid frame without a single crease or scuff, despite the recent skirmish on the ice moon of Krell 7. Her eyes, large and luminous, held the color of liquid mercury, capable of shifting from serene calm to battlefield fury in an instant. To Finn, she was both awe-inspiring and utterly terrifying, especially when she looked at him like she knew exactly what he was thinking, which, of course, she usually did. Finn adjusted the collar of his standard-issue navy blue uniform, trying to ignore the sweat prickling at his neck. He'd spent 3 sleepless nights planning this. Not a military op, not a tactical maneuver, just a prank. A harmless, ridiculous, hopefully hilarious prank. The kind that just might, crack that serene Varelian composure and make her laugh. Or at least roll those stunning silver eyes in exasperation. Anything but that unnerving, knowing stillness. His plan was simple, elegant in its absurdity. Using a salvaged neural mimic, a harmless toy from a black market vendor on the fringe station Whisper's End, he'd project a fake, overly dramatic marriage proposal into the shared comms channel during their next joint briefing with General Thorne. The mimic wouldn't actually transmit sound. It would only feed a brief, silent burst of fabricated neural imagery directly into Lyra's personal comms implant, synced to her unique biosignature. To everyone else, it would seem like Finn had just cleared his throat awkwardly. But to Lyra, she'd hear him drop to one knee, metaphorically, since they were both standing, stammer something about eternal cosmic devotion, and present a shimmering holographic ring made of stardust. The sheer, ridiculous cheesiness of it was the joke. He'd seen her react with dry wit to human romantic comedies during their downtime. Surely this parody would land? He palmed the tiny, warm device hidden in his sleeve, his thumb hovering over the activation stud. The briefing was about to start. General Thorne's gruff voice crackled over the station-wide comm, summoning them to Conference Bay Gamma. Finn fell into step beside Lyra as they walked, the rhythmic click of her armored boots echoing his own softer tread. He stole a glance. Her expression was unreadable, focused ahead, but the faintest upward curve touched the corner of her lips. Nerves, he told himself. She's just concentrating. He didn't notice the almost imperceptible flicker in her silver eyes, a subtle shift in their internal luminescence that Varelians use to process complex emotional data. They entered the conference bay, a circular room dominated by a holodeble projecting the swirling nebulae of contested sectors. General Thorne, a grizzled human with a cybernetic eye that glowed faintly red, stood waiting, flanked by a stoic Varelian strategos whose armor was a deeper, gunmetal gray. Finn's heart hammered against his ribs. Now or never. As Thorne began his opening remarks about supply line vulnerabilities near the Helix Rift, Finn took a subtle breath, focused on Lyra's profile, and pressed the stud. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then, Lyra stopped mid-stride. Not abruptly, but with a sudden, profound stillness that cut through the room's tension like a blade. Every head turned towards her. Thorne paused his briefing, his cybernetic eye whirring softly as it focused on her. The strategos tilted his head, antennae-like sensory filaments on his temples twitching minutely. Finn held his breath, a grin already starting to form. Got her. He imagined the ridiculous proposal playing out in her mind. The stardust ring, the overly earnest declaration. He braced for the eye roll, the sigh, maybe a quiet, "O'Connell, your juvenile human rituals are noted." Instead, Lyra turned her head slowly, those mercury eyes locking onto his. They weren't amused. They weren't exasperated. They held a depth of emotion that stole the breath right out of Finn's lungs. Warmth, a startling vulnerability, and something that looked terrifyingly like acceptance. Her voice, when it came, was clear, calm, and carried effortlessly through the silent room. devoid of any neural mimicry, spoken aloud for everyone to hear. "I accept your proposal, Finn." Silence. Not just quiet, but the kind of vacuum silence that swallows sound whole. Thorn's cybernetic eye blinked rapidly. The strategos made a soft, questioning chime in his throat. Finn felt the blood drain from his face, replaced by a wave of heat so intense, he thought his uniform might spontaneously combust. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The neural mimic was still warm in his sweaty palm, its single-use charge spent. This wasn't part of the script. The fake proposal was supposed to be silent, private, a shared joke only she would experience. How could she? Then it hit him, cold and sharp as a Varelian monomolecular blade. The mimic didn't just project to her. In its crude, black market design, it had briefly synced with her comms implant, creating a two-way neural handshake. For that split second, while he was projecting his ridiculous fantasy, her formidable Varelian mind, trained in telepathic resonance since childhood, a skill she rarely used on humans out of respect for their mental privacy, had effortlessly brushed against his surface thoughts. Not just the fake proposal, but the intent behind it. The nervous hope, the desperate desire to see her smile, the underlying, terrifyingly real affection he'd been trying to bury under layers of military protocol and bad jokes for months. She hadn't just heard the prank. She'd felt the raw, unguarded truth beneath it. Before Finn could stammer out a denial, a frantic explanation about neural mimics and bad comedy, the station's proximity alarms shrieked to life, shattering the unbearable tension. Red emergency lights bathed the room in a pulsing, bloody glow. The holodouble flickered, replacing the nebulae with a stark, flashing icon. Unidentified hostile vessel vector intercept, ETA 90 seconds. Kthar Raiders. Thorn barked, instantly shifting from bewildered commander to battle-hardened general. All hands, battle stations. Valen, O'Connell, you're on point for perimeter defense. Move. The moment of paralyzing awkwardness vanished, replaced by the adrenaline-fueled clarity of imminent combat. Lyra's expression snapped back to its usual cool efficiency, the vulnerability vanishing behind a mask of silver-armored resolve. But as she turned towards the exit, her hand brushed against Finn's arm, a fleeting, deliberate contact. Her voice, low and urgent, reached only him over their private squad channel, cutting through the blaring alarms. "We will discuss your proposal after we ensure neither of us becomes space dust, Corporal." Finn swallowed hard, the taste of copper in his mouth. He followed her out of the bay at a run, the weight of his prank, and the terrifying, wonderful implication of her words, clanging in his chest louder than the alarms. The Kthar were brutal, unpredictable pirates, known for their biomechanical ships that screamed as they flew and their utter disregard for the fragile peace treaties. Engaging them was never clean, never simple. They reached the primary weapons control nexus, a cramped, humming chamber lined with holographic targeting displays. Lyra moved with preternatural speed, her fingers dancing across the interface, calling up shield harmonics and weapon loadouts. Finn slammed into his console, his hands flying over the controls, syncing the station's point defense lasers with Lyra's Varelian energy cannons. The external cameras showed the Kthar vessel, a jagged, organic-looking thing like a skeletal leviathan fused with corroded metal, lurching out of a microwarp, its maw-like forward section already glowing with building energy. "Shields at maximum resonance frequency." "Finn," Lyra commanded, her voice tight but steady. "They're targeting the primary reactor coupling." "On it," Finn yelled back, rerouting auxiliary power. His mind raced, not just with tactical calculations, but with the echo of her words. "I accept your proposal." Was it real? Was it just her way of calling his bluff in the most devastatingly perfect way possible? Or had she truly? He shoved the thought down. Survival first. Existential, romantic crises later. The Kthar ship fired. A beam of sickly green plasma lanced out, striking the vigilant Dawn's shields. The entire station groaned, lights flickering violently. Warning klaxons wailed a new, more urgent tone. "Shield integrity at 68%. Finn reported, his voice tight. "They're punching through faster than projected." "Adapting frequency," Lyra murmured. Her eyes narrowed in concentration, silver hair escaping its circlet to frame her face. "Finn, I need you to manually override the starboard laser array. Its targeting algorithm is glitching, probably from that last EMP burst on Krell 7. Can you get a clean shot on their port thruster nacelle?" It was a suicide run. The manual override console was located in an exposed maintenance gantry on the station's outer hull, directly in the line of fire. Finn didn't hesitate. "Give me coordinates and a path. I'm going out." Lyra's head snapped towards him, her mercury eyes wide for a split second before hardening again. "It's too dangerous. The gantry's barely shielded. And if that nacelle blows, their main weapon overloads and takes out half the station." Finn shot back, already grabbing a magboots harness and a compact pulse pistol. "Your fancy cannons can't hit it from here with that glitch. My aim's steady. Always has been." He met her gaze, trying to convey everything he couldn't say. The apology for the prank, the fear, the stupid, persistent hope, through his eyes alone. For a heartbeat, the chaos of the battle seemed to fade. Lyra held his look, her expression unreadable, then gave a single, sharp nod. "Coordinates uploading to your suit HUD. Go." "And O'Connell." She paused, her voice dropping, almost lost beneath the station's groans. "Return intact. We have unfinished business." The airlock hissed open, revealing the terrifying beauty of open space. Zyra's violet light cast long, eerie shadows across the station's hull. Finn magnetized his boots and ran, the Cthar ship looming like a nightmare against the starfield. Plasma bolts sizzled past him, vaporizing chunks of hull plating. He could feel the heat through his suit. Reaching the gantry, he slammed the override panel open, his fingers flying over the manual targeting controls. The Cthar ship was turning, its main weapon charging again, the green glow intensifying. "Focus. Breathe. Squeeze." Finn lined up the shot, the crosshairs dancing over the thruster nacelle. He fired. The laser beam, thin and precise, lanced out. It struck true, punching a molten hole through the nacelle's casing. The Cthar ship shuddered violently, its main weapon beam sputtering and dying as internal explosions rippled along its port side. Cheers erupted over the comms channel. "Direct hit, O'Connell. Get back inside." Thorne's voice boomed. Finn turned, relief flooding him, just as a secondary explosion from the crippled Cthar vessel sent a wave of shrapnel screaming towards the gantry. He dove for cover behind a conduit housing, but not fast enough. A jagged piece of metal tore through his leg, punching a hole in his suit. Alarms blared in his helmet, pressure loss, oxygen critical. Pain, white-hot and nauseating, seared through him. He slumped against the hull, fumbling for the emergency sealant patch, his vision swimming. Then, a shadow fell over him. Not the shadow of the dying Cthar ship, but a familiar silhouette outlined against Zyra's glow. Lyra. She'd suited up in record time, her silver armor now encased in a sleek, white EVA suit, her white hair floating around her helmet like a halo. She moved with impossible speed, her Varelian strength easily hauling him up. One arm locked around his chest, the other fired precise bursts from her wrist-mounted plasma caster, vaporizing incoming debris. "Hold on, Finn." Her voice crackled in his helmet, calm but laced with an urgency he'd never heard before. "Don't you dare fade on me now. Not after everything." She activated her suit's emergency thrusters, pulling them both back towards the airlock. Finn clung to her, the pain in his leg a distant throb compared to the overwhelming sensation of her presence. Her strength, the sheer, terrifying reality of her holding him. As the airlock cycled shut behind them, medics swarming, Finn's last conscious thought before the painkillers hit wasn't of the battle, or the Cthar, or even the gaping hole in his leg. It was of Lyra's voice, saying those impossible words. "I accept your proposal." And the dawning, heart-stopping realization that maybe, just maybe, the most terrifying and wonderful mission of his life was only just beginning. The alarms were fading, the medics were talking, but all Finn could see, as darkness edged his vision, was the fierce, protective light in Lyra's silver eyes, and the unspoken promise hanging in the recycled air between them, heavier and more real than any prank could ever be. The station was safe, for now, but the delicate, uncharted territory of whatever came next between a reckless human corporal and his white-haired, silver-armored alien commander felt infinitely more perilous, and infinitely more precious, than any Cthar raid. Recovery aboard the Vigilant Dawn was a blur of antiseptic smells, humming medbay drones, and the persistent ache in Finn's leg, a souvenir from the Cthar's parting shot. But more disorienting than the pain was the silence. Not the absence of sound, medbays were never quiet, but the silence from Lyra. She delivered him to the medics with brisk efficiency, issued orders for his care in her usual clipped tone, and vanished. No lingering glances, no private comms check-ins. Nothing. It was as if the words, "I accept your proposal," had been erased from reality. swallowed by the vacuum of space along with the Kthar wreckage. Finn told himself it was protocol. Post-combat debriefs, damage assessments, diplomatic fallout, all demanded the commander's full attention. Yet, every time the medbay door hissed open, his heart lurched, only to sink when it was a nurse or a junior officer. Days bled into a week. His leg healed faster than expected, thanks to Varelian regenerative gel, but the knot in his chest only tightened. Had he imagined it all? The neural mimic glitch, the battle stress, his own desperate hope twisting her words? Maybe proposal had been a miscommunication, a Varelian term for tactical commitment or something equally mundane. The thought was a cold stone in his gut. Then, on the 8th day, she appeared. Not in uniform, not in armor. Lyra stood in the doorway of his private recovery room wearing simple, flowing Varelian civilian attire. Ivory fabric that shimmered like spun moonlight, accentuating the pale elegance of her skin and the stark white fall of her hair. The silver circlet was gone. She looked vulnerable, human almost. Finn's breath caught. "Commander," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "Lyra," she corrected softly, stepping inside, the door sealed behind her. "Just Lyra. Here." She didn't approach the bed. Instead, she stood by the viewport, gazing out at the slowly rotating bulk of Zyra. "I owe you an explanation, Finn. And an apology." Finn pushed himself upright, ignoring the twinge in his leg. "For what? Saving my life? Accepting my—" He trailed off, unable to say the word. "For using my ability without consent," she said, turning to face him. Her silver eyes held a storm of emotions. Regret, resolve, something achingly tender. "Reading your mind, even passively during that neural sync. It was a violation of your privacy. A grave one by Varelian standards. I was startled by the depth of what I felt beneath your prank. The affection, the fear, the hope." She took a step closer. "And I reacted impulsively, saying I accept." It wasn't just about the fake proposal. It was an acknowledgement of you, of what I saw, what I feel. Finn's pulse roared in his ears. "So, it was real?" "It is real," she affirmed, her voice gaining strength. "But it is also complicated. Dangerously so." She moved to the foot of his bed, her posture rigid again, the commander reasserting herself. "The Kthar attack wasn't random, Finn. Intelligence intercepted fragmented comms before they were destroyed. They were hired, paid to disable the Vigilant Dawn during a critical diplomatic summit next week. The signing of the Helix Accord." Finn frowned. "Who'd want that? The Accord solidifies the alliance. It's peace." "Precisely," Lyra said grimly. "Peace threatens powerful interests. On both sides, there are factions within the Concord who see humanity as a chaotic, unstable variable. And there are human corporations like the Titanus Group who profit immensely from the ongoing border skirmishes, selling weapons and tech to both sides. Titanus has deep pockets and deeper connections. We believe they orchestrated the Kthar hit. The implications crashed over Finn. And they know about us?" Lyra's expression darkened. "Not specifically, but any perceived weakness in the command structure of the station is a vulnerability they will exploit. A human and a Varelian commander growing close? It's a narrative they can twist. Emotional entanglement compromising judgment. Alien influence over human officers. They'll use it to undermine the Accord, to paint the alliance as fragile, built on sentiment, not strategy." She looked at him, her gaze intense. "My saying I accept, it wasn't just personal. It was a declaration. And declarations make you a target." Before Finn could process this, the station-wide alert blared. Not the shrill alarm of attack, but the urgent, pulsing tone of a Priority 1 diplomatic emergency. Lyra's comm chimed. Her face hardened as she listened. "The Titanus delegation's shuttle has just docked," she said, her voice icy. "Unscheduled. Led by Silas Rourke." Finn knew the name. Silas Rourke, CEO of Titanus Group. A man whose charming smile was as famous as his ruthless business tactics. A man who'd publicly praised the Vigilant Dawn's stability, while his subsidiaries armed the very raiders who tried to destroy it. "They're here to observe the final Accord preparations," Lyra said, the words laced with disdain. "And to assess the command staff." She met Finn's eyes. "This is where it begins, Finn. They will watch us, test us, look for cracks." She took a deep breath, a flicker of that earlier vulnerability returning. "Can you do this? Can we navigate this together? Knowing the risks?" Finn looked at her, at the woman who'd read his foolish heart and seen something worth accepting, who'd charged into vacuum to save him, who now stood ready to face corporate assassins and political saboteurs for the sake of a fragile peace and something even more fragile between them. The fear was still there, cold and sharp, but it was drowned out by a surge of fierce, protective determination. "I'm with you, Lyra," he said, his voice steady. "All the way. Pranks, pirates, or Titanus tycoons. Just maybe no more neural mimics." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, the first genuine one he'd seen since the briefing room. "Agreed. Though," she added, her eyes glinting with a familiar, dangerous spark, "I reserve the right to deploy Varelian telepathic countermeasures if Rourke gets too handsy." The tension in the room shifted, charged now with shared purpose and the electric hum of a love story forged in fire and shadow. They walked out of the medbay together, not as corporal and commander, but as Finn and Lyra, stepping onto a battlefield far more treacherous than any Cthar raid. A battlefield of whispers, hidden daggers, and the high-stakes gamble of trusting your heart when the galaxy is trying to tear it apart. The summit loomed, Rourke's predatory presence a dark cloud on the horizon, and the fragile thread of their connection felt like the most vital, and most endangered, asset on the vigilant dawn. The real test wasn't surviving the next attack. It was surviving each other's enemies without losing what they'd just begun to find. And somewhere in the station's depths, Silas Rourke was already setting his first trap, unaware that the two people he sought to manipulate were far more dangerous together than they ever were apart. The days leading up to the Helix Accord summit unfolded like a slow-burning fuse. Silas Rourke moved through the vigilant dawn with the practiced ease of a predator in a gilded cage. Charming diplomats, flattering junior officers, and always watching Finn and Lyra. His presence was a constant, subtle pressure, like gravity pulling at their every interaction. He never spoke directly of their relationship, never made overt threats. Instead, he deployed insinuation like a scalpel. A lingering glance as Lyra corrected Finn's tactical assessment in a briefing. A too-casual comment over dinner about the unique challenges of interspecies command dynamics. A gift delivered to Finn's quarters. An antique human locket, supposedly from Earth's 19th century, containing a tiny, folded note that read, "Loyalty is a currency. Spend it wisely." Finn kept the locket hidden, his stomach churning. Lyra, for her part, became a fortress of icy professionalism in public, her silver armor polished to a blinding sheen, her commands delivered with flawless precision. But in the quiet moments, stolen glances across a crowded corridor, a brush of fingers during a late-night strategy session in her quarters, the vulnerability returned. They spoke in coded phrases, shared silent understandings. They knew Rourke was probing for weakness, and their greatest strength, their bond, was also their greatest liability. The breaking point came 2 nights before the signing ceremony. Finn was reviewing security schematics in his quarters when an encrypted data chip slid under his door. No note, just the chip. Heart pounding, he inserted it into his secure terminal. The screen flickered, then displayed grainy surveillance footage. Lyra, alone in her private meditation chamber, her silver armor removed, her white hair loose. She was speaking, not to anyone in the room, but seemingly to herself. Her voice, usually so controlled, was thick with emotion. The accord must hold. For them. For him. But how long can I shield him from what they'll do? From what I might have to do? She paused, her mercury eyes glistening. If they force my hand, if it comes to choosing between the Concord and Finn, I don't know if I can be the commander they need. Finn's blood ran cold. It was a private moment, twisted into evidence. Proof, Rourke would claim, of Lyra's compromised judgment, her dangerous emotional entanglement with a human. Proof that she couldn't be trusted to uphold Varelian interests at the summit. Finn knew it was likely fabricated or heavily edited. Lyra would never voice such doubts so carelessly, but it didn't matter. In the court of interstellar politics, perception was reality. Rourke would leak this. The accord would collapse. Lyra's career, possibly her life, would be forfeit. He found her in the observation deck, the same place where his prank had begun this impossible journey. She stood silhouetted against Zyra's violet glow, her civilian robes replaced by her silver armor once more, but her posture was weary. "He has it," Finn said, holding up the chip. "No need to explain." Lyra didn't turn. "I know. He planted a microdrone in the air recycler of my chamber weeks ago. I discovered it too late." Her voice was flat, defeated. "He wins, Finn. He'll use this to turn the Concord Council against me, to paint the human delegation as manipulative. The signing will be cancelled. War will resume. No, Finn said, stepping beside her. He doesn't win. He held out the chip. Because we're going to give him exactly what he wants. Lyra finally looked at him, confusion warring with suspicion in her silver eyes. What do you mean? We let him leak it, Finn said, a desperate plan crystallizing in his mind. But we control the narrative. We make it our weapon. He explained quickly, his words tumbling out. We feed him a different recording. One that shows him Rourke trying to bribe a Varelian aide, threatening to expose fabricated scandals unless the Concord backs Titanus interests. We stage it. Use his own tactics against him. Lyra's eyes widened, then narrowed with calculating intensity. It's risky. If we're caught. We're already caught, Finn countered. This is our only play. Trust me, Lyra, like you trusted me on that gantry. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the station and the distant sigh of Zyra's atmosphere. Then, slowly, Lyra reached out and took the chip from his hand. Not the fake one. She crushed it under her armored boot. Then she placed her other hand over his, her touch cool but firm. We do it together, she said. No more secrets. No more solo runs. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of covert action. Using Lyra's authority and Finn's knowledge of human tech loopholes, they lured one of Rourke's key aides, a nervous man named Vex, into a trap. They recorded him accepting a bribe, in credits that vanished from his account the moment the recording ended, and confessing to Rourke's plot to sabotage the Accord using personal leverage against Commander Valen. They embedded the recording in a data packet designed to look like it had been intercepted from Rourke's own encrypted channel. On the morning of the summit, as dignitaries from a dozen species gathered in the grand ceremonial chamber, the packet leaked. It spread through the station's networks like wildfire. By the time Silas Rourke strode into the chamber, his usual smile firmly in place, the mood had shifted. The Varelian strategos who had witnessed Lyra's acceptance now regarded Rourke with open hostility. Human delegates whispered urgently among themselves. The Concord Council representatives' antennae were rigid with disapproval. Rourke's smile faltered as he scanned the room, sensing the trap. He tried to bluff, to dismiss the recording as a forgery, but Lyra stepped forward, her voice ringing with clear, undeniable authority. The evidence is verified, Director Rourke. Your attempt to destabilize the Helix Accord through blackmail and fabrication is a violation of Galactic Charter 7. You are hereby detained for crimes against interstellar peace. Security forces loyal to the Accord moved in. Rourke's protests were drowned out by the murmurs of the crowd. The signing ceremony proceeded, not with tension, but with a renewed sense of unity forged in the exposure of treachery. Finn watched from the sidelines, his legs still aching faintly, his heart swelling as Lyra, resplendent in her silver armor, placed her hand over the Accord's sigil, her expression one of hard-won triumph. Later, as the celebrations began, a rare mingling of human laughter and Varelian harmonic chimes, Finn found Lyra on the observation deck once more. The violet light of Zyra bathed her in an ethereal glow. She'd removed her armor again, wearing the simple ivory robes. She looked exhausted, but peaceful. It's over, she said softly, not turning as he approached. Is it? Finn asked, stopping beside her. Rourke's detained, but Titanus is still out there. There will be others. Lyra finally looked at him, her mercury eyes reflecting the starlight. Perhaps, but today we protected something worth fighting for. The Accord, the Alliance. She paused, then added, her voice dropping to a whisper. And us. Finn took a deep breath, the memory of his foolish prank feeling like a lifetime ago. He reached into his pocket, not for a neural mimic, but for a small, smooth stone he'd picked up on Krell 7, a moon known for its resilience. He placed it gently in her palm. No stardust rings, he said, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. Just this, promise, to keep fighting, for the peace, and for you. Lyra closed her fingers around the stone, then around his hand. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture of profound trust and intimacy that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Below them, the vigilant dawn hummed with life, a beacon of fragile unity in the vast, indifferent dark. The galaxy was still full of threats, of shadows waiting to pounce. But in that moment, bathed in alien light, holding the hand of the woman who had seen his foolish heart and chosen to accept it anyway, Finn O'Connell knew they weren't just surviving. They were building something new, something real, and no corporate saboteur or political schemer could ever truly extinguish the quiet, defiant light of a love that had faced the void and chosen to shine anyway. The story of the Accord and of Finn and Lyra was far from over, but its foundation was now unshakable. Forged in fire, tempered by trust, and sealed not with grand declarations, but with a simple stone and a shared silence under the watchful eye of a violet giant. In the weeks that followed, the Helix Accord held firm, its strength bolstered by the exposed treachery of Titanus Group. Silas Rourke vanished into a high-security detention facility, his empire crumbling under interstellar sanctions. On the Vigilant Dawn, life settled into a new rhythm, one still filled with drills, briefings, and the occasional Cthar skirmish, but now threaded with quiet moments of shared warmth. Finn and Lyra no longer hid their bond. They wore it like armor of a different kind, stronger, quieter, built on trust rather than secrecy. They walked the observation decks hand in hand, watched Zyra's storms from the mess hall during off-shifts, and argued good-naturedly over human coffee versus Varelian lum tea. Lyra even laughed once, truly laughed, when Finn tried to replicate a Varelian meditation pose and toppled over. The crew noticed, of course, but instead of suspicion, they saw only unity. A human and an alien, side by side, proving that peace wasn't just a treaty, but a daily choice. When the Concord promoted Lyra to fleet liaison and offered her a post on the new joint command station orbiting Epsilon Prime, she accepted, but only on one condition, that Corporal Finn O'Connell be assigned as her strategic advisor. The request was approved without hesitation. On their last evening aboard the Vigilant Dawn, they stood once more before the great viewport. No alarms blared, no enemies lurked, just the endless stars and the soft hum of a ship at peace. Lyra turned to Finn, her silver eyes glowing with quiet joy. "No more pranks?" she asked, a playful edge in her voice. "Only the good kind," he replied, smiling. She kissed him then, slow, sure, and full of promise, under the violet light of Zyra. And in that kiss, there was no fear, no doubt, only the quiet certainty of a future written not in grand battles, but in shared sunrises across alien skies. Their story wasn't ending. It was finally beginning, and this time it would be a happy one, for as long as the stars burned.